Hello there.
Welcome back to another episode of Star Wars in the Galaxy, watching all the Star Wars we can get our hands on. I'm Eli.
I'm Jacob.
And today we start season 16 of Star Wars in the Galaxy. A season that I haven't been this excited to start a new season in the Galaxy for quite a while. And not that any other season we've done is particularly bad, but this season is Obi-Wan Kenobi. My personal favorite Star Wars live-action series, something I will defend. This is a hill that I will die on. What I think is the closest thing, I would call it identical, so others may disagree, that we will ever get to an episode 3.5. It seems like the perfect bridge between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope in terms of the themes.
And definitely with that intro as well in the first episode.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll get to that later. But, of course, we are not alone. Jacob and I are going to be joined by guests for almost every episode in this season. We're doing a guest frenzy, and we wanted to bring on some new guests, invite some old guests back. This is also one of the only seasons of Star Wars in the Galaxy where we will be watching things in a sensical manner. It'll be one episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi per episode. It makes sense, obviously, for In a Galaxy. You can't get used to that because we're going to go back into things that don't make sense, like watching 40-minute chunks of a movie or 2 episodes at a time or something like that. But we, of course, have a guest joining us this episode from the Imperial Senate podcast, from the Octo Radio Network. We have Nicky Kumar. What's going on, Nicky? Thanks so much for joining us to talk Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Absolutely. It's a good time to, I think, revisit Obi-Wan. And yeah, I can't believe how long it's been since the show came out. It doesn't seem that far. And then it's like, start counting the months back and you're like, oh, wow, okay.
It's crazy. I remember, so my specific experience, I'll ask you about this very soon, but I was just remembering my specific experiences, which is I woke up at this was of course premiered at Celebration Anaheim 2022, which Jacob and I were both at, but not for the entirety of. But I remember back behind me is a couch, and I was sitting on this couch. I'd woken up at 3:30, 4 a.m. that morning because I was just so goddamn excited because that was the day we were going down to Anaheim. Mm-hmm. And also that night, even though Kenobi released at 9 that night, but I stayed off the internet, so I didn't know that. So I thought it was going to be releasing at midnight, Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett would. And I was just like, I felt horrible because I got up at 4 in the morning. But I remember just watching those with bated breath, and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe it's here, and it's this good.
Yeah, totally. It was one of those things where I think multiple times during those first 2 episodes that they released together, it was just multiple occasions of, am I really watching this? Is this happening? Is this a real thing in front of my eyes? So yeah, no, it was totally surreal. It remains surreal how just again how deep it goes. I agree with you, Eli. I think this more than any show is the missing episodic film. It connects so deeply to both the original trilogy, of course, but also it adds so much context to the sequel trilogy and why Leia has a blue lightsaber, why her child is named Ben, why her lightsaber kind of looks like Obi-Wan's, and it's
so many things.
All these things. It just recontextualizes all this great stuff, and that's why I think it really does fit in with that that feeling of this is the saga.
Yeah, it does
Absolutely.
feel and yeah, I'm so impressed with it for so many ways. But before we get to Obi-Wan specifically, I do want to ask, because this is your first time on the show, Nicky, how did you get into Star Wars originally?
Yeah, it's a long time ago. Basically, gosh, how old? I think I was 3. I think I was 3 when my mom showed me Return of the Jedi first.
Wow.
So that was, and at that point, there were only 3 Star Wars movies. So that was the last one. So I saw the last one first. And yeah, that's one of my distinct memories. Just probably the earliest memory I can actually place is watching 3PO and R2 walk up to Jabba's palace. That is just an image seared in my head. So yeah, no, it's it's been a long journey. And I remember special edition coming out. I remember the prequels coming out. I remember where we are now. It's like, it's just really interesting to have experienced a lot of Star Wars in just really a short span of time. Because it like I didn't really live through the sort of late 80s, early 90s, what people call the dark times, when there was very little in terms of what was happening with Star Wars outside of sort of revisiting the films. And then yeah, so when I got in, it was not too long before special edition ramped up, Shadows of the Empire, the prequel, those were all in the pipeline. And then from there, it kind of, even though we had a 10-year gap between Revenge of the Sith and Force Awakens, it also feels like it hasn't really stopped since 96 or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a wild ride, but yeah, that's where it all started, Return of the Jedi.
Amazing. Okay, so to piggyback off of that, what brought you into the world of podcasting online, sharing your voice with other people who are fans of Star Wars as well? What kicked that off for you?
Yeah, I think in college, my friend had a radio show on the student radio station. So shout out KVRX 91.7 FM. And it was funny because he had a music show for Japanese and K-pop music, and that was a really popular show. So my friend was already in on the station, and then I went up to him, another friend and I, and we're like, hey, what if this stuff we do and we just talk in the living room, what if that was a show? And so we kicked that idea. He sent it up to the people, and they were like, oh yeah, we trust you, you're good, you got this. Here's a 8 p.m. slot on a Wednesday night. So they stuck us in prime time, and we literally just did nerd. It wasn't just Star Wars. It was like nerd podcasting, because Game of Thrones was happening at that point. The Hobbits were coming out. Clone Wars was happening. So Rebels and stuff. It was those years. And so we were on student radio doing sort of this. And then after that, we graduated, and I just met people who had the same interest we have. And because I had that experience in radio, when I was asked to join and start a podcast, I was like, oh yeah, that seems easy. Like, that seems like something I'm not a stranger to. But yeah, since then, Imperial Senate's been alive since 2016. So I think sort of the build up to Rogue One was when that show started. So yeah, and it's been a good few years of gathering with people who like to talk about these things and cranking episodes out.
All right.
Yeah. If nothing else, I think we should, without further ado, we should jump into Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 1. I will do our summary for the episode. In Part 1 of Obi-Wan Kenobi, we begin with the Jedi Master Vivienasleia protecting a bunch of younglings from the assault on the Jedi Temple during the Great Jedi Purge in Order 66. We then flash 10 years later, where Obi-Wan Kenobi is living as a hermit and working for this meat processing company on Tatooine, a broken man, and he won't speak up when others are getting robbed out of fair deals on Tatooine or when other things are happening. But the Inquisitorius comes down to Tatooine because they have a lead on a Jedi named Nari, who is trying to hide on the desert planet. Nari manages to escape the Inquisitors when they think they have him cornered, due to the impatience of the third sister Inquisitor, whose name is Reva Savander, who was one of those Jedi we saw in the first scene, who survived Order 66. And Nari manages actually to find Obi-Wan Kenobi in the desert, who he somehow managed to know was there on Tatooine. And Obi-Wan told him to forget the past, to bury it, like he did, which eventually gets Nari killed, hung in the town square, which leaves Obi-Wan heartbroken. Meanwhile, on Alderaan, we get a glimpse into the life of young Leia Organa, who lives a life that she's kind of satisfied with because of the pomp and circumstance of being the young princess of Alderaan, shamed by her cousins for not being a real Organa because she was adopted, and just generally trying to have fun while evading the stern gaze of her father, but especially her mother. But desperately wants to find Obi-Wan Kenobi, believing the Jedi is still out there. So she hires a group of thieves to kidnap Leia, to hopefully to draw Obi-Wan out, which works as Bail and Breha call Obi-Wan for him to help rescue their daughter, emphasizing that she is as important as Luke in the Jedi's plans for the future and striking back against the Empire. Obi-Wan finds and digs up his sabers in the deserts of Tatooine and boards a transport headed for Leia's last known location, the planet of Daiyu, where a certain Ithorian lawyer named Thabor Sheens will later have a humble abode. Shout out Ionized Bastards. To board a transport for Daiyu and start to regain who he was and start to rescue Leia. All right, so we begin with this opening 5-minute recap, which I remember watching the day of. I actually skipped through it this time just because I remember it did a very good job, but we've done IAGs on episodes 1, 2, and 3, so there wasn't really anything I had specifically for this, but I wanted to leave it open for either one of you, just in case you had anything about this recap of the prequels.
I love it. It's just this little recap, getting everyone back up to speed, saying, hey, we know most of you probably watching know this inside and out, but for those of you who maybe don't, welcome back. Here's the refresher, which I like that they did that, since these shows they're getting pretty interwoven with everything. And I think when my dad or someone sits down with me, someone who's not as invested as I am watching Ahsoka, something like that, it's pretty confusing if you really don't have all your ducks in a row. So I appreciate that they did that. And what a perfect way to start it. It just got me in my feels right off the bat. This is the symbolic cherry on top of Star Wars, the community, and then finally Lucasfilm re-embracing the prequels a little bit, in a way of bringing it back into the new shows and what's happening in a way where it's put front and center. And I appreciated that. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I think it was a good move for sure. Obviously, the first time I saw the episodes, we didn't get it. They didn't play it for us at Celebration.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, they didn't.
No, it was straight in. So it was funny to turn on Disney Plus later and be like, oh, there's a 5-minute recap of the prequels here. That's a fun touch. So yeah, no, it's smart for all the reasons Jacob just mentioned. And I think it is true. Star Wars is getting bigger and bigger every time. It was 3 movies, then it was 6 movies, then it was a few shows,
6 movies in a show,
and then it's all these. It's just ever expanding. If you are casual in how you approach it, I can see how you need those little pointers and refreshers and whatnot. So yeah, no, it's a good move, and it is fun to see how they package it all and what they choose to show and all that stuff. So yeah, no, well done.
Yeah, I think it's. I remember liking it, but I skipped it specifically just because I didn't think there was a lot that we hadn't covered in previous seasons of the show. Yeah, we then get our title card. Well, actually, no. First, before we get the title card, we get that Order 66 flashback, which, if I remember correctly, that is the reason that warning plays on Disney Plus beforehand. Of this episode that contains a disturbing scene. Is that because of I seem to remember that was because of the rising prevalence of school shootings? Was that supposed to be what that was?
The Uvalde shooting happened right after, or no, it was right before.
Shit.
Right before.
Oh, shit.
The Uvalde shooting happened right before these episodes came out. So they put that on again. I don't think that was there at Celebration, and it was there on Disney Plus. So yeah, no, I think it had to do with that.
It was after Uvalde. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I just remember being in shock starting at the temple. I think one of the things that this series does well, and we'll get to this when we get to, of course, our main characters of the show, is I didn't really expect to see Coruscant in this show.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes sense for a flashback purpose. It makes sense to see Order 66. It makes sense to ground us there.
Yeah, I thought it was a great, seeing it from the younglings' perspective. It was harrowing, and it was amazing. And obviously later on, when we get more of Reva's backstory, that comes back around. But I do think it's good as well to watching it put us right back in this moment that is confining Obi-Wan's life at this time. Order 66, the fall of the Jedi. And then we see how he still really is in that moment in a lot of ways, or his life is obviously defined at this point in many ways by him trying to emotionally recover from that moment, and what he feels is his failure and trying to live with that. So it also serves that purpose, which I think is cool, and it's an interesting way as well to bring us into this story. I would have expected them to slow burn open onto Obi-Wan, but they get to that later, and I think that's cool. I think I like how the first episode takes its time, I would say.
Yeah. I remember my first reaction to the opening being, because obviously we didn't know how it was going to start, so it could have been anything. And I remember when I saw younglings, my first thought was, oh my god, are we going to see Obi-Wan as a youngling? Is that where they're starting? And I was like, wow, this is so great. And then I started screaming when
you're like,
running.
This is like, amazing. No, this is terrible. Make it go away. No,
it's bad.
Stop it now. Stop it now.
Yeah. And that is like, it's, you can't escape Order 66 in a lot of Star Wars storytelling. It is just the key event of the story in so many ways. So there has been this really good and traumatizing trend.
Yeah.
Let's show you this event from as many different perspectives as we need to based on the story. So yeah, it's like, it's not the first time in recent memory of, hey, remember Order 66? Want to see it again? And the answer is always no, but we're gonna do it anyway. And so yeah, no, it was a great opening, and it was terrifying, and even just down to the way it's shot at the child's height. Even I think the cameras kept low, and you're watching this happen all around you, and yeah, it's everything it's supposed to be. Like, Order 66 is terrifying, even more so as a child in the temple.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really brilliant way to introduce the story. Obviously, at that point, we don't know it's Reva, but it is interesting that it focuses on her. She's very much the center of it. It wasn't too hard to make that leap. But yeah, no, it's just it's brutal. It's traumatizing always.
It is absolutely brutal to watch. One of the things that you're saying about being terrifying it is it relates to actually one of the criticisms I've seen of this show, which I don't agree with personally, which is that, and I feel like that's very evident in the beginning, and also with the scene of Obi-Wan and Nari at night on Tatooine, which there are those, and we'll see this later in the show, which is shaky cam shots, the breakneck pace editing. I've seen a lot of critiques of people saying, oh, it feels like unpolished, it feels unrefined, and I'm like, I think that's the point.
Yeah.
I think the point is that this series, above all else, among other things, is a series by trauma, and it's every major character except for at the beginning, except for Leia, who then goes through a decently major trauma, has some sort of trauma that they've dealt with. And with Anakin with becoming Vader, Obi-Wan with everything with 66 and the downfall of his Padawan, Reva obviously with the purge and stuff like that. And it's not always going to be this pristine vision of it all. There's some beautiful shots in this show, but mixed into there is also the shaky cam, there are those great, I think actually the best way to put this is the end of part 3. There are those majestic shots of Vader coming into that village on Mapuzo like a horror villain.
Yeah.
But there's also him chasing Obi-Wan through the grasslands of that planet at like such a breakneck pace and it feels so sloppy, and this guy is just running for his life.
Yeah, it's the chaos of it. Like,
Absolutely.
it's done by design to evoke that. Yeah, that's funny to me how people would complain that, like, let me tell you, Order 66 a little too chaotic for my taste. That's a funny hill to be on. But yeah, no, again, it's literally the galaxy is breaking at that point, and it's shown through filmmaking. What a concept.
What a concept. I want to move to, in the present day, I think maybe the character who I was most surprised by the first time I watched this episode. It's not Obi-Wan, it's not Reva, it's not Leia. It's the Grand Inquisitor.
Oh, the Grand Inquisitor.
That monologue is top
so
tier.
Good.
It's top tier.
So good.
That you guys are
so
tripping.
Much.
This is not who the Grand Inquisitor is. I can't agree with this.
I know you're.
I'm not going to complain too much. It's not even a matter of being a purist. It's just like, I watch this show and I'm like, from my perspective, like, respect to Rupert Friend, great job, but what is this haughty, over dramatic outer space George Santos? I feel like originally he was like a real kind of soft spoken, chilling villain, and I don't know, it's just jarring seeing that change. And I know that characters to be different in different things. I'm not gonna say, oh no, nothing can be different, no one can change. But like, I can't get behind the makeup either. I think we saw Powens in Revenge of the Sith in live action. We saw them be incorporated before. Big old watermelon head on Grand Inquisitor in this one. It's a choice, and I mean, I won't be too. I'm not just gonna crap on it. I think the monologue, like, it was a good monologue. If it were up to me, would I have made the delivery maybe a little bit different? Maybe I would have. I don't know. But like, all things considered, I think it's a great way to produce the characters, and I think the monologue especially does a good job of showing the Inquisitor's ethos and explaining their MO coming into this whole thing. I have my gripes with it. I won't lie about that, but I can't act like it's all bad either, personally.
I understand that. I do just want to say, for the next 48 hours after this episode, the line circulating through my head, also beyond the trailer, because this was in the trailer as well, was, of course, now if he was smart, he'd keep moving, but the Jedi Code is like an itch. He cannot help it. Just the way, I love how the way that Rupert Friend says itch scratches an itch in my head. That's what it does. Like, it's so satisfying every single time.
Yeah. My little experiment that I always go to when it comes to animation is I would love to watch Jason Isaacs do live action Inquisitor lines, and I'd love to watch Rupert Friend do animated Inquisitor lines and just see what happens.
That would be interesting. Yeah.
I think they both bring such a specific sort of tinting to the same character, and
I do bring something different to the table.
I don't think that he's characterized wildly different than he is in animation. I think, like, especially in his intro episode, like, he's pretty flashy, and so it's different, but I think it's like things can and probably even should be different based on medium. A book character acts differently than they do in a show. It just happens.
I can get behind that. The same
and
thing.
Yeah, and I think I'd also rather
about Thrawn, for example.
Right, I'd rather see something fresh than samey in the end. So I think, Rupert is he's fascinating. He makes fascinating choices, and it's especially in the I think last episode, like, just some of his facial expressions are out of this world, and the hello. And like all these great things.
That is maybe one of my all-time favorite lines from this show, period. End of sentence, is just hello, third sister.
Oh man, it's so funny. Revenge does wonders for the will to live. He's so wild.
He's kind of a petty king in this.
Oh yeah,
he is so incredibly
all the
petty.
Inquisitors, all the Inquisitors,
and that's the dark side, right? Like they all are.
Yep.
And so yeah, no, I think it's really fascinating getting the three of them in right at the beginning, seeing their dynamics, seeing how Riva is definitely the odd one out for several reasons.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a very interesting sort of way to set the scene of have them show up on this pivotal planet because another guy is there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's a very sort of interesting way to bring it all together.
To your point there, this series goes into something that I never think we were going to go into, which is how close can you get the Empire to discovering the truth without them discovering the truth?
Mm-hmm.
Where you see an Inquisitor figure out, oh my God, Darth Vader has a son 10 years early, 9 years early. And then you even have her meet and capture Luke Skywalker. But then she turns back to the light and preserves that secret. But it gets pretty close if people looked at the wrong hologram at the wrong moment.
Yeah.
This could have been devastating for the entire saga.
Yeah. That's what makes it fun.
This show is full of those moments.
It's the same thing that makes the Order 66 arc in the Clone Wars so compelling. Yeah. We're this close. We're this close.
There's these critical moments that flip the wrong or right way to just absolute chaos. One of my favorite moments in my favorite book is in Leia, Princess of Alderaan, when she meets Moff Panaka. And he's like, man, this kid, there's something about this kid. and to the point where he knows. And he's going to call up his boss and talk about it. And then Saw Gerrera blows him up. So it's like all these just little things. It's like this whole show is a lot of that. Like, oh my God, that was a close one.
They got so damn close, and yet they didn't quite get there.
Princess of Alderaan, Nicky, by the way. Good taste. Amazing book.
It's really good.
And I feel like it is one of those books. I think it pairs so well with this show as well. Getting to see some of Leia's childhood and that combining with some of what we see in Princess of Alderaan, kind of obviously all that enhancing our understanding and the impact of what's happening here. I shout out to that book as well. Shout out to Claudia Gray. Because that's a fantastic book. And I had the opportunity to chat with her for a couple minutes at Star Wars Celebration 2022. And she told me about how she said that as they were going through the process of writing this book with the Lucasfilm Story Group, she kind of took a lot of things back to the drawing board after Carrie Fisher passed away and got more ambitious in terms of how this was going to be an homage to the character of Leia and her entire life. And I think that's so beautiful. And anyone listening who hasn't read this book, another reason why you should read it, one of the best Star Wars books out there, in my opinion. Claudia Gray, a true goat, like you said.
True goat.
Yeah, and sorry for the spoiler.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's been out since like 6 or 7 years now. I think we're in the safe zone.
We're
past the statute of limitations on that one.
We're talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi. This was a year and a half ago. I think we're good.
Yeah. But yeah, no, totally. It's really fascinating. I mean, yeah, like when you talk about close calls, later on in this episode, we get the direct showdown of Riva and Owen. And he's got the lightsaber at his neck, and it's just, again, what if all these different little things happen? And yeah, no, it's really like for sort of the first episode, it hits some really heavy notes.
It's absolutely crazy. I actually want to get to Moses, Ingram, and Riva right now, which I feel like we cannot address this show without addressing the absolute bullshit that happened at the beginning of the show, where those rat bastards over at the Phantom Menace decided Black woman in Star Wars, not on my watch, and decided to relentlessly cyberbully Moses Ingram for reasons. And Ewan had to record that video in his car being like, you're no Star Wars fans if you like, you're no Star Wars fans in my book if you cyberbully our actresses, which duh. It all feels so that whole thing, even for one of these Star Wars controversies, all felt extremely stupid to me.
Yeah, it's peak pathetic, and it's sad that it has sort of the harm that it does.
Yeah,
is also not. It's not proportional to how pathetic it is. It's not something you can blow off, unfortunately. And yeah, it's just sad. Like in the end, it's sad and pathetic, and I don't know how it stops. You just gotta push back every time and let it know its place.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
It's horrific, and also I just think, of course, none of this matters when due to harassment. But I will also just add that I think that Ingram does it hurts so much also just because how shit on her performances, when I think it is one of the most rich and complex and nuanced performances we've seen in Star Wars in an era defined by rich, complex, nuanced performances. I think,
yeah, I kind of think that along with all the and I think I'm not necessarily prepared to go into this right now with the knowledge and that I have, but I do think that intertwined with the racism, the sexism, the hatred, the kind of that I think was directed towards Moses Ingram in response to her performance. People give Reva crap. People gave that crap for her being annoying and everything. Oh, she's so annoying, this, that. But like, to some extent, isn't that part of her character? I honestly think that it works for the show. And not to say that I agree with or excuse people being totally awful and racist towards anybody. But I think that this character, Reva, she's clearly got a chip on her shoulder. She desperately wants to prove herself. She's being a little bit of a tryhard. She's trying to put on a show. And I think that we need this maybe is a teachable moment in terms of media literacy of just because this character is
that's
like
1 to 3.
Just because this character is abrasive and annoying doesn't mean that doesn't mean it's bad acting. That doesn't mean it's a bad performance. Sometimes that's how it's supposed to be, because that's who Reva is. Kind of being over dramatic. She's trying to be really tough, trying to be really scary. She's trying to prove herself, and the people around her can't really stand that. And that's an essential dynamic of the show. That's not something that we have to shit on. It pisses me off seeing people shit on that, because I think it adds to the show.
She's very intentional. She's
100%.
She's not just doing it because this seems cool.
Yeah.
She knows what she's doing. She's smart about her character. They wrote a nuanced character. And again, to your point, she is hiding something from her coworkers. She's hiding her intentions. She's hiding who she is. Not to say she's secretly good, but like she's not working on their terms necessarily. And it's like, what do you do when you're hiding? You build around it and you sort of swing the other way. And that's what Reva is. She does swing further than the other Inquisitors, and they don't like that. And I guess people watching may not like it either. And yeah, it's the point. And then again, even if you don't like an actor, and even if the actor is bad, let's just assume the actor is bad, even if there's no reason to get online and pester and bully and harass. It just doesn't, there's no excuse. They could be a terrible actor and they don't deserve that. So I know none of us are directing this lesson. We don't need this lesson. Probably your listeners don't need this lesson.
Probably preaching to the choir talking about this with you two here.
So
it needs to be said. Need to put it out there.
Definitely. Yeah. And you can take that out with you, because maybe you will encounter some people who need to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Jacob, to your point about Reva not feeling quite right to you in the beginning, is very similar to a comment I heard Alex Damon make from Star Wars Explained make, basically, which is like, he was like, in the first few episodes, Reva didn't feel quite like a typical Inquisitor to me. And then by episode 3 or 4, he was like, I get it. That was the point. The point was that she
was trying to fit in, and then she was overcompensating because of that. Kind of wilded out a little bit.
Yeah.
That's who she is.
God, I love that line specifically with that confrontation with Owen. Not Owen, it's before she gets to Owen, but it's in the town square where she and Fifth start threatening those villagers. And that bark of hands go first. It's so over dramatic, and you can tell she's meaning every word she says. She is so pissed, and it is so clear, and it's such great work there.
Yeah.
I think we should get to, as much as Moses is great and Reva is great, I want to get to our main character, and I just want to say, God, what a gift it is to have Ewan McGregor back as Obi-Wan Kenobi for these 6 episodes. There are like a few moments in part 1, a few small moments where it kind of feels to me like it's Ewan saying the lines, not Obi-Wan. But those are like a line or two. And then everything else feels like, yeah, he's back. He's back in the character. He got it. He's got it. He knows what he's doing. Absolutely. I know he felt quite a bit of that insecurity coming back into the character. And I don't know what it is. For me, that delivery of is he okay when he's talking to Owen about Luke doesn't sound quite right to me. But other than that, like the goodbye Darth scene, of course, in 6, everything he says to Leia and from here on out, it just ticks. It just makes sense. He just kills it over and over again.
Yeah, I think that it's pretty amazing. Even if Obi-Wan's just standing there gazing off every shot that he's in, and maybe this is me totally fanboying out a little bit, but it feels awesome to see him back in Star Wars, just the mythos, the importance of Obi-Wan, and also, for me at least, growing up more with the prequels already coming out and being pretty established, Ewan McGregor, specifically as Obi-Wan, just seeing all these little moments of just Obi-Wan processing mourning, trying to live with everything that's happened, how he sees his role. And a lot of my favorite moments in this episode are just the kind of Kenobi core moments of him just going, just sitting there, just holding the Jedi belt in his hand or staring off at the desert horizon, just moments like that, because we have so much built up that those moments are so laden with meaning and emotion and significance. And that's kind of what makes this show cool when we're working with stuff like that.
Yeah. There's moments where just really small things where when he's at the meat packing place at the carcass of the giant fish or whatever.
What a creative setup, by the way. Yeah. What a cool little
It's very cool. Yeah.
I never really thought about the fact that, like, before this, I never really thought about the fact that, yeah, probably Obi-Wan wasn't just hiding in this cave the entire time. He probably did need to work and do stuff.
Guys gotta eat. But this moment I always love in that scene is when he cuts the extra slice off, and the way he folds it in his little napkin is so delicate and orderly, and it's like it's so out of place. Obi-Wan himself, it's like it doesn't belong in this sort of harsh giant knife chopping environment. It's just so delicate and it's so purposeful and tidy, and that is Obi-Wan being embedded into this ecosystem. It just speaks so much about who, as much as he's packed away his old life and given up in a sense, there is still Obi-Wan there. He hasn't forgotten that those little things that are still him.
Yeah. 100%. It's the details.
I will just say we don't get Bonnie in this episode, but we do get Joel Edgerton back as Owen, which I remember during the interviews for the press junket for Obi-Wan Kenobi, Deborah Chow was singing Joel Edgerton's praises and saying basically what a gift it was that Lucas had casted him for Owen way back in 2002 for Clones.
Yeah.
And it does feel so nice to have Owen and Beru back and to get more of them.
And to realize how much they fought for Luke.
Yeah.
You obviously you don't watch A New Hope and are like, oh, they don't care. Obviously they care, but like,
Yeah.
to see what they do, how far they're willing to go, not just in the first episode or the last episode, like just the entirety. It's really like, it is actually very moving, and it is a story about, in general, how far these adoptive parents are willing to go. And I think that's such a, like, nobody here is taking care of their own kid.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nobody.
No one.
Yeah. Because one dad is in it, but he's not in a good place, let's say. And
he's not in a good
he's not in a good place right now.
He's in hot water.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
yeah. So it's like, it's just very moving watching these 5 adults care so much for these kids and what they're willing to go through to not even, like, because again, Owen doesn't care about Luke's role in potentially saving the galaxy. Like, that doesn't matter to me. Like, you only care, he tells Obi-Wan, he's like, you only care if he's showing his abilities, and you're not actually concerned about the boy, which I also obviously don't think is true, but it goes to show his mindset. Like, he's like, just, I care for him and I love him, and we just want to live our life out and not have these problems. So it's a great story of parenting.
Yeah, there's,
absolutely.
there's a line later. It's not talking about Luke. It's actually talking about Leia. When Leia runs off at the end and gets captured by Flea and his gang, which we're gonna get there, and how fucking insane that is. Where Brea's, I cannot believe that Leia's run off again, and I think maybe Bale says something like, "Is this so unlike her or anything?" Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
She's not. I thought you said you really got through to her. Brea says, and Bale responds, "You know what she's like," and Brea responds, "I know who she's like," and I love that. I love that line specifically because we have those obscure parentage from both Luke and Leia, obviously the same. It reminds me of that line. It reminds me of Bruce's line from New Hope. He has too much of his father in him. Where at the time it was, he had too much of his father in him before his father went and got himself killed.
Recklessness.
But now we know he has too much of his father in before his father became basically this genocidal mass murderer.
Yeah.
And
a little different.
I know who she's like. In that way, Bale was talking about Leia to Leia earlier in this episode about his young and restless days. So that's one. But I could also see Anakin. She has a lot of her father in her. But then I go back to Clones, where Typho says to Obi-Wan, "It's not him I'm worried about running off." And I'm like, she could also be talking about her mother too.
And I think, doesn't Obi-Wan do the same in episode 2? I can't remember the exact way the scene plays out, but how he straight up says, he's definitely talking about Padme, right?
Yeah.
Like, you remind me of her or something.
In part 2 of this show, got it. So you're saying it's second.
Second episode of the series.
You remind me of someone. I think it was something like that.
Yeah. I think the trick
moment.
was, your first assumption is he means Anakin, and then he specifies further, and you're like, oh, he's talking about Padme. So it's a very special moment, and I think, just because Leia's sort of coming to the forefront now, I think a lot of the talk about this show was, of course, what's the story. I think there was a lot of maybe skepticism when it was announced from people who are like, but he's just sitting there. He's just sitting on the planet. And I think even for me, I was like, I don't want the mission to be diluted. This idea that he just runs all over the place and does whatever he wants. Sort of the mission he assigns himself to watch Luke. I was worried it would be altered in a way that felt like frivolous. And so when a lot of people were freaking out, especially as more rumors came out that, oh, they're going to this planet and this planet, as more of that came out, I remember people freaking out, and my stance was always, we won't know until we see it, but the mission has to matter. It has to be important enough to make him leave. And as soon as it was like the mission is Leia, I was like, oh yeah, okay, there's nothing else. Like there's nothing else that could be more important to the story.
Yeah, I was gonna say largely the same thing. I remember. I think that's one of the most impactful shots of this episode for me is that first time we see Alderaan, and we're like, and instantly, I remember the moment I remember clicking, I'm like, oh, that's why he's leaving Tatooine. It all makes sense now. It's one of those things, and I think I have this sometimes with Star Wars, where it feels so obvious, but I also stupidly never would have thought of it before.
Yeah, I think
I'm like, why the hell didn't I think of this? This is so obvious. Another one of the other Skywalker twin gets kidnapped. Obviously, he would go after her.
It's almost like for me, I didn't like fully believe they had the guts to tell that story. That is risky territory. And again, Vivienasleia Blair is the brightest star in this whole galaxy.
My God, she's
and it's
so
like
perfect.
you had to nail that casting, and they went beyond nailing it. She is so perfect. And even at Celebration in London this year, at the Obi-Wan panel, she speaks about the show and the character and all that. She speaks better than most adults. She speaks better than 90% of Star Wars podcasters, probably.
Probably.
And she's what, 11, I think, even younger when this came out. So yeah, no, she's a star, and yeah, the writing for Leia, her performance, the story they'll out for her, it makes. That's always the thing. Like people are like, will it be worth it? And they made it worth it. And I think
they made it so incredibly worth it.
I think that is such a key thing to this show working.
Vivian is such I remember just being struck by how much she and the to call it an elephant in the room would almost be understating how large this is. Of course, the enormous shadow of Carrie in all of this. And she feels exactly like what I imagined Carrie as a 6-year-old would be.
Yeah. She reads those lines like pitch perfect. You don't doubt it for a second. Oh, that's about Leia. Yeah,
it works.
That's 10-year-old Leia. Like it just is.
It's really delightful. It's really delightful. She does a fantastic job.
I will say there's one performance I'm going to quibble a tiny bit with that does not matter in the large scheme of things, but I just do want to say this, which is on the topic of Brea. So Brea was a recast, as many know. I will say, first of all, I haven't seen this conversation being had, but I will say that it was a Latin actress who played Brea in Revenge of the Sith, and now it's a white actress playing her here, which is not great. But I do wonder because the original actress's name is Rebecca Jackson Mendoza. I don't think she's been in a lot of stuff.
By original actors, do you mean the episode The Revenge of the Sith one?
Yeah, the Revenge of the Sith actress. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you said recast, you didn't mean they had someone else for the show.
Yeah. And then no, I mean from Sith to.
Oh, okay. Just
from Sith to Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yeah.
Got it. I was a little confused.
No. From Sith to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I don't know why they chose Simone Kessel instead. I don't know what it is for me, but I'm not really sure about her as Brea. I don't think she's bad by any stretch of the imagination. I think she's okay. But I think it's also I think there's also something I think more for me is when the other members of the family are Vivian, who is perfect, and Jimmy Smits, who is never not awesome. Anything less than that, it's gonna seem to flounder a bit for me.
That's funny. I didn't have a single issue with her.
Me neither. I thought that I enjoyed her performance. I thought that Brea in this was. I thought she did a great job.
I also think she is also Maori, or at least part Maori. So it's not a full on whitewash. If that was an issue.
Okay. Apparently isn't. Yeah. But anyway.
I thought that her dynamic, her rapport with Leia was cool to see, because it's we haven't seen a ton of Brea before, and it was cool to see.
Yeah,
something
and
a little bit different.
I also just assume because the actor in Sith didn't do any acting, I also assume that she's probably stronger. There's no acting in Sith.
I know. She just holds Leia. Yeah, I don't hate Simone by any stretch of the imagination. I also think, but I think it's also just that everything else for me in this episode, like I will say at the end when we talk about our overall thoughts, this is a nearly perfect episode of Star Wars television for me. Everything else shines so brightly that something that doesn't quite as much seems kind of dull by comparison with the metaphor. But by the way, fucking Jimmy Smits, man, my God,
dude, don't miss
that
he
man.
Doesn't miss. Whenever he shows up, he's on fire.
It was so good to see him back in this, and to see him getting some screen time.
I think this might be my favorite
performance
as the character of Jimmy awesome. as Jimmy as Bail. Actually, just the entire conversation with Leia about you are a real Organa. Like, love that so much. It so makes sense that Bail, even though he is the senator, even though he is the consort of the Queen of Alderaan, kind of does still have that. He hasn't been fully lulled in by the customs and traditions of the Alderaanian royal family.
Because he married in.
He married in.
Yeah. So he didn't live with that.
Yeah,
it's a cool character point. Yeah.
I think that he does. I love the fact that Leia disobeyed her mother by going to the forest to look at ships, but her father knew that she was doing that, and she was like, "So what'd you find today?"
Yeah.
That detail automatically was just like, this guy gets it. This guy gets it.
Yeah.
That also reminds me of the line you brought up earlier, that I know who she's like. She's also Bail's daughter. 100%, right? Like
100%.
They're so unique, or so in tune with each other. So yeah, it's a very special relationship, and I think it's all these things. Even just one line in Rogue One when Jimmy Smits is like, "I trust her with my life." Like all these little things just stuck in the various areas of Star Wars universe that just it twists the knife on the destruction of Alderaan. And it's this thing, because obviously when you watch it the first time, A New Hope, you're like, oh, I'm sad because good planet blown up. But like
destroyed.
You don't know anything about it, right? It's peaceful. Okay, it's a peaceful planet.
They have no weapons.
Let's say a major bummer. But and
now it's a real bummer.
Yeah, it's a real downer in the end. But and it's George's fault at the beginning or the end of Revenge of the Sith. It starts with George because he makes this planet beautiful. It's stunning.
It is so gorgeous. And
so George started it in 2005, and then every opportunity since, it's like you just, again, almost like Order 66, we're just retroactively adding trauma to this one event. And it's so sad, but in these moments, it's very nice to watch.
I agree with that. I will say that about I was just going to say that about the destruction of Alderaan. That reminded me that we now know that Lola was another casualty.
Oh, is that confirmed?
Princess and the Scoundrel confirmed it, yeah.
Oh, no.
Lola's on Alderaan. She's gone. Yeah.
Oh,
Lola's gone.
Oh, man. That's rough.
Yeah, I think Beth Revis got some advanced footage of Obi-Wan before then.
Mm-hmm.
So she managed to get a little peek in that novel, which came out decently soon after. Leia was like remembering her old droid that got destroyed on
Alderaan. Lola was indeed a real one. I'll never forget that time Lola also got turned into a tracker for the Empire, and then also tried to sabotage everything, and then became good again.
The meme I always love is the Leia Simpsons overlay meme with Leia and Leia with a cigarette in her mouth being like, "Oh, so here's the thing. You forgot to switch that one off from evil."
Yeah.
That's. But I will say that I'm going to say that maybe a bit blatantly, one person that I don't feel so much sympathy for, who got who probably didn't survive Alderaan, is that fucking cousin of hers.
Dude sucks.
Who
big time.
Who Niano is his name. And I know that specifically because there was a trivia thing I was doing, and I remember specifically I looked up that one wrong, and I got that one wrong pretty recently.
Yeah.
That will stick with you. But I wrote my notes, fuck Niano Organa and the Orback he wrote in on. And I will stand by that. I will say that that he does set up the circumstances for the moment that I knew that Vivian nailed it as Leia, which is that then I guess I don't need manners when I'm talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
I just sat there with that meme in my head, looping in my head for a good few minutes afterwards. I'm just like, holy crap, he just got absolutely burnt. He just got absolutely roasted by somebody who's probably 2 years younger than him.
No, it's great. And it's impossible to just not be enamored by this child who will not take shit from anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I really do. The brief arc about not being a real Organa.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things it does is it reminds us of the family that Leia's supposed to be a part of before we realize the fucked up one she's actually a part of.
Yeah. A little bit. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I also love that piece for her, and I love how it resolves by the end. I'm gonna do it my way, and I'm gonna have my little holster, and you're not gonna bug me about it.
That's Leia.
Yeah,
that's Leia.
So it's a really, again, just key developmental piece of her life.
Yeah. I also forgot in this specific this episode was our first live action mention of Purrgil.
Wow,
until I rewatched it.
Wait, when did that?
Because Bale was like, I used to be young like you were. I wanted to chase Purrgil across the galaxy.
Oh, look at
that. So we went from mention and then saw its silhouette in Mando season 3 to Ahsoka
being inside of one,
which is the show of
in the mouth of the bird.
Yeah.
Hey, Rebels and slowly making its way everywhere. You love to see it.
Rebels is always winning.
It is such a fun inclusion because it's like, it creates this mythos around just the space whale. Even there, it's possible he has never seen one ever, but he just knows of this mad. Oh my god!
Of the mythical tale of the and they helped us develop hyperspace technology and all that.
Exactly. Kind of stuff. And either way, it just works. It adds so much to the fantasy of it.
That's a good point. I think now is a decent time to talk about Flea. Absolutely,
a flea in the room.
Absolutely buck wild idea.
Yeah.
Like, whoever decided we should do Flea as the thief who kidnaps Leia, they should get a raise just for that decision. It is such an absolute chaotic out of left field decision.
Flea a favor.
Definitely.
Maybe like Jovi Harold had a life debt to Flea and was like, we got to roll and we need a weird guy to do it.
I watched that for the first time. I was like, what is happening? Is that really Flea?
That chase through the forest, the chase when they're trying to get her, is like so almost Three Stooges level bad.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's funny. If it wasn't designed to be comedy, I don't know what it was designed to be because it's just funny to watch. Flea.
There's literally shot
run pepper.
Yeah, dudes. Literally the shot of Leia running as fast as she can on her 10-year-old legs.
Yeah,
and then a whole ass adult alien of some sort sprinting behind her, failing to catch up.
Oh no, I'm gonna trip.
It's like, oh my god. The number of unforced errors. One of them when she just runs into the branch and she's and then falls down. It's like, you gotta be joking right now, man. Leia really is blessed with the Force. It's really to be happening. This is unbelievable.
It's a bit goofy, but honestly, like
the burlap sack over Leia's head too. that was a cherry on top a little bit. I was just like, okay.
Yeah, that's one of those things that for me is like I watch it and it strikes me as silly, but in a way that adds to the charm of the show, and not in a way that's like I don't like that. Which if you don't like it, fair enough. But like, but I just always watch that scene and giggle my way through it.
It's a lot of fun, and for me, it's like, you know, you can have your debates about how the staging and all that kind of stuff and the choreography and whatever, but it accomplishes the narrative job fine. And I think that's the most important thing, which is Leia gets kidnapped. It doesn't really matter how Leia gets kidnapped. It's just Leia gets kidnapped, and they're working for Reva. I actually think that Flea was actually, like, he did a lot better. Like, he acted a lot better than I thought he was going to.
I'm not even sure if he was acting. That was just a Tuesday for him.
That's true. That's also true. That is also true. That is also incredibly true.
Like, Flea, can you bring one of your own shirts too? Yeah, that's fine. I got some weird ones.
Yeah. And then we have that great line when Brea and Bail call Obi-Wan. And I think that some people would have absolutely hated this, but I would have loved to hear, because they were circling around it in this scene when Brea and Bail were communicating with Obi-Wan, but I felt like it needed a Obi-Wan, you're our only hope.
I mean, they got as close to that as they could without literally repeating that line. Bail.
Yeah.
What did he say? He said,
He's
for
like,
her, one last fight.
Yeah. It was
pulling all the.
It was.
Yeah.
Pulling out all the stops. Yeah. But it adds to that. It definitely does add to the and I know this has been discussed to death about the show, but it adds to everything of Leia and Obi-Wan's near interactions in The New Hope. You can read into it now. General Kenobi, years ago, you served my father in the Clone Wars. Wink, also that other thing.
Yeah.
Now he asks for your help again. He hasn't asked for it in 9 years, so this is goddamn important.
I love all these little effects that things have, because it's that exactly. Even with the end of Rogue One, Leia's BSing to Darth Vader's face is 10 times funnier after Rogue One, considering he literally watched that ship leave.
And like, take away.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that is so true. Wow.
It adds so much. It just adds so much kind of irony to it. And yeah, the Obi-Wan Leia relationship is just totally redefined.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bail's the holograms physically with Bail and Brea before Bail comes to Tatooine himself, which I remember actually that was just a complete shock to me. I did not think that Bail was going to come to Tatooine himself. What was that line? You couldn't save Anakin, but you can still save her, which is such a banger of a line. It's like always being about Obi-Wan trying to the past. Obi-Wan's failed along the path. And Bail says, you made mistakes. We all have. But it's the future. It's about the future. It's about these children. They are our hopes. And you need to do everything in your power to keep them safe.
And it's just a really, just really fascinating angle to hit Obi-Wan with. She's also their child. Does she not matter to you? And I think he actually has to put that together. Because if we're going to be honest and think about it, how often do you think Obi-Wan has thought about Leia?
Yeah, probably not at all. Yeah.
Out of sight, out of mind. Yeah. Luke is the guy for him. It's such a great thing to confront him with. And again, it speaks again back to the Inquisitor monologue at the beginning. The Jedi cannot help himself. And in the end, this is who you are. You will go do the right thing.
Which of course, Grand Inquisitor says is a weakness, but really is a strength.
Exactly.
The Jedi, which is that at their core, they help those in need. And especially in this case, there's a child being kidnapped by the Empire. There's no way Obi-Wan won't. There is no way he won't.
And that's what makes great fantasy villains, because you get this from the Inquisitor to Voldemort. It's they do not value what they don't understand, and they don't understand the need to protect and the need and the care people have for each other and a sense of duty and all this stuff. They don't believe in it, so they don't understand its value. So that's why the good guys will always beat them out in the end.
Absolutely. You couldn't save Anakin, but you can't. But you can save her. Is still sticking in my mind as Obi-Wan steps out on this grand quest to rescue Leia from the Empire, which that's the other thing about, and we talked about this in the beginning, of course, but this all still feels a bit like a fever dream to me. That we got this show and that we got it as good as it came out is maybe one of the most impressive things that Lucasfilm has done that Disney has done with Lucasfilm since the purchase in 2012.
Yeah, no, it's monumental. And I also, I think about my own experience watching it. Obviously I feel extremely fortunate to have been able to be in essentially the right place at the right time to watch it at Celebration and get a crowd, because obviously we've had all sorts of episodes go on Disney Plus, and the Star Wars Disney Plus era has involved a lot of, whether through just the way it's released or also because of COVID, it's involved sitting at home, generally in quiet, watching it yourself, and then hitting everyone up later. And to be able to watch an episode of Star Wars TV in a setting that is as close as you'll get to a theater on opening night. It was just it was such a special thing. And I think that's why these first 2 episodes of Obi-Wan, it's impossible to separate that experience for me. And that last shot of him tucking something in his pocket and you see the lightsaber hilt, I just remember everyone losing it. It was just such a great theater moment. And John Williams is in free flow, and we're there, we're back, and it's so great to have you in the role again. It's a real prequel kids stay winning moment.
Absolutely.
Prequel kids definitely do stay winning. One last thought before we wrap here up with our overall thoughts, which is just that I love the fact that John Williams told everybody, okay, so after Rise, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done after Rise. And then I got one theme left. And then he just drops maybe the most banger Star Wars theme ever.
Yeah.
Before he goes. What the hell is how is this man, after this is 45 years after his original score for A New Hope, the Obi-Wan theme is still constantly going through our minds, and it is such an earworm, and it's so good and representative of where that character is at that time.
I have a theory on the music piece in that I think I have this history. So I have a theory that John Williams has just had a bone to pick about this for 40 plus years, because I believe what we know as the Force theme now, I believe he originally wrote that as Obi-Wan Kenobi's theme. And that's why it is the way it is. It has this melancholy to it, but it has this grandeur to it. And that is supposed to symbolize Obi-Wan as this sort of fallen great Jedi warrior who's now a hermit, represent everything that has been lost. And that's why Binary Sunset originally had a different score to it. And it was actually George Lucas who was George Lucas was the one who actually, why don't we put this one there? And he put what we now know as the Force theme was Binary Sunset. He put that there. That was a George Lucas audible on John Williams. And of course John Williams is not gonna be but no. And I think there are versions of the score somewhere where you can hear what probably was going to be there. But since then I've had this idea that John Williams has always been they took my Obi-Wan Kenobi theme away from me. They repurposed
get it back.
Yeah, they repurposed my Obi-Wan theme. So I am going to knock out a banger here. So I think that's right. So there's probably a historian who can either verify or tell me I'm full of crap. But I do believe that is what happened with that original theme. I
seem to remember thinking I seem to remember seeing something about it being Obi-Wan's theme as well. But I will also just say that I also think Natalie Holt's score, just general, incorporating Williams' theme as well as her own original work, is extremely underrated for the show. So
I'd agree. And I think I can agree with that while also being like, is it as spectacular as the other shows? Maybe not. But it is underrated.
Like, yeah, I think it's underrated, but I think like the only Star Wars season of Star Wars television that I really say I think I might like it more than is probably Mando 3. Probably. I don't know. The
score-wise?
Score-wise, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The other live-action shows.
Yeah. No, I think the Kiners obviously blew Ahsoka out of the water. And
Ahsoka's up top. But
and I love the Mando stuff, but...
Dude, anything the Kiners do in Star Wars is just... No, it's going to be top tier.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's definitely an under-talked about aspect of the show. I think we know she's talented. I'm sure a lot of people have watched Loki. We know she's talented. Yeah. And we know what she can bring. So it'll be great to see if she ever ends up down the line getting another shot at something.
I hope she does. And with that, I wanted to ask both of you, Nikki, I'll let you go first with what your overall thoughts on part 1 of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, and again, it's just to briefly say it again, it's impossible for me to separate it from the viewing experience. So it's something I always look back on as just being a very special occasion of something to have. And it's a great first episode. It has some unsung hero like MVPs we didn't talk about today even. I love Tika the Jawa. I mean, Tika is just a blast at every scene. Yeah, and also a perfect R2-D2 cameo in the where R2 does nothing. No one says anything about R2, but R2 is just there at the party.
And 3PO,
yeah, it's just wonderful. Even 3PO talks. R2, I don't think does anything. It's just super great. I love seeing my boy there. And yeah, I think. Just as, again, the sort of kickoff of this adventure, I think it just sets the table so well. The last scene of the lightsaber and the music and just, let's go, we're ready. And yeah, this whole series in general is just special. You guys are going to cover it more extensively in your next few episodes. But just, yeah, for my part 6 is a top 5 TV episode for me. I think it just comes together so well. And yeah, it's special. And it's special getting to see Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen and more with later shows. But obviously, this was his big return, too. It's just so wonderful to watch them, especially back on the convention circuits, soaking in all the love they've deserved for a long time.
Absolutely. I will say, I call this episode in my notes, I said it was a nearly perfect Star Wars episode, and I completely stand by that. It shows you how much I love the show, that this is in the bottom half of, if I rank the episodes, this would be in the bottom half. Because 6 and 5 and 3 are just that good, that 1 has nowhere else to go, even though I don't dislike hardly anything. I dislike hardly anything about this episode. It's just, I went into this, like, so this is a series that I had expectations and higher expectations than I wanted to have, but God, it hit it out of the park every single time. Holy crap. Jacob, what about you?
The first, this is my first time watching Kenobi since it came out. And the first time that I watched it, I was kind of mixed on it. There were a lot of things I really liked about it. Deeply emotionally satisfying, really amazing return for Ewan McGregor and so much beloved Star Wars material. At the same time, I thought that there were a lot of places where it could have been done much better, in my opinion. But so far for part 1, I thought that it hit all the right notes. It's always going back to rewatch something, noticing a lot of the little things I didn't the first time. I thought it was very enjoyable, and I really thought that it was, so far, seems to be firing on all cylinders. So I'm curious to see how I feel and how I respond moving forward, because you always notice something new every time that you rewatch it. So far so good, I'll say. So far really good, actually.
Yeah. There's also one note I always like to put next to the Obi-Wan show. It is also probably the biggest sufferer of any, certainly Star Wars production, when it comes to being a COVID production. Like, you can just see that so many times. Oh, yeah. It didn't get sort of... COVID messed up so many things with how film sets are run, how productions happen, how they're timed. Everything was really up in the air. And I think this show, unfortunately, got hit the worst by it. So I do always like to throw that little asterisk on this. And because there are things that are like, they just, for whatever reason, they don't look as good as X, right? So it's just an important point to remember. I think I always give it a lot of extra runway for having to put up with so much of that.
Absolutely. All right. Before we go, we have a few questions that we ask to all of our first-time guests here on In a Galaxy.
Is this trivia?
No, it's not trivia. It's not trivia. It's not trivia. Not yet. First question I have for you, Nicky, is who is your favorite Star Wars character?
I hate this question. I guess I always have to say it's a twin crown. They sit together on the throne. It's Sabine Wren and Poe Dameron. They're just my favorites.
Interesting choices.
Yeah.
Sabine. Shout out to Sabine Wren.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
What is your Star Wars movie ranking? How do you rank them? If you don't have a ranking handy in your mind, top 3, top 5, just give us something.
I've seen Nicky's ranking, so I know he has it.
I do have a full one. Let me get it because I like to talk about this. I'll always have to preface this. I like all of them a lot. That should just be understood. So last place is still a movie I like. Okay. Do you want it bottom to top or top to bottom?
Sure.
However you like.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go. So I count 12 movies. 12th place, I have Rogue One. I like Rogue One. It's just I have my own things with it. 11th place, the Clone Wars movie. 10th place, Attack of the Clones. 9th place, Revenge of the Sith. 8th place, The Force Awakens. 7th place, The Rise of Skywalker. 6th place, Solo, A Star Wars Story. 5th place, The Phantom Menace. 4th place, The Empire Strikes Back. 3rd place, A New Hope. 2nd place, The Last Jedi. And 1st place, my one true love, my first love, Return of the Jedi.
I do remember, I think Nicky and Alden and myself have always had pretty similar rankings. At least, I think mine's still pretty similar to yours just because both return at number 1, TLJ high, Rogue One low. So yeah,
there's a section in the middle that can change just depending how I feel that day. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah, no,
they're all
get
great.
that.
I would rather watch any of them than most other things.
No, I agree. Even mid one. Anyway,
that's for another episode. We'll break that one down.
Unbelievable.
I could say that now, Jacob. You're outnumbered.
He said he likes it. He said he likes it. So
yeah.
I'm gonna count that as a win for the Rogue One corner.
Who is your favorite what's your favorite non-movie Star Wars media that you think people are missing out on?
Star Wars Rebels is the most complete Star Wars experience anyone could ever give themselves.
Thank you. I could not agree more with that.
Yeah.
You came to the right place to say that today. Thank you, Nicky. I appreciate that.
It's always a blessing to be in company that gets it. Yeah. Oh my God. Like, where do you even start? Where do you even start with Rebels? It is just 4 seasons of utter brilliance, and literally, again, anything you could want out of Star Wars is in there. So if you are listening and you have not yet gone down that journey, please do so.
Absolutely. Star Wars Rebels is, as we've said many times on the show, phenomenal. I'm excited to when we get to that in a galaxy, which won't be too far away, actually. At least I think it might be a little further because I need to go recheck Dawn of Rebellion because I know we got confirmation in Dawn of Rebellion that Obi-Wan takes place before Survivor. I don't remember if we got a confirmation or not if Andor season 1 takes place before before Rebel season 1 or after. So
I think it's like the same year, but how specifically the same year, we don't know.
Yeah, but that's going to be interesting to. Who is this is a topical because of something in the Galaxy is doing tomorrow. Who is your favorite Star Wars background character?
Oh, I guess background is a moving target depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, no, I get it.
So like when I think background, my favorite one has always been Sebulba.
Yeah,
because
that's a cool pick.
It's like the pod race is just one of my favorite things ever. Talk about that forever. And I just love Sebulba. I love how he's great and also the worst. He's obviously good. He's obviously a great racer, but also takes liberties with how he wins. So he's so fascinating to me. Dugs are cool. Which is again is like a whole other thing, and how the Clone Wars took Dugs and Toydarians and these two characters who are like scumbags, and then from them built out two pretty honorable, sophisticated societies. And it's like they made the Toydarians legal, and it all comes from this guy who's a slave trader. So it's just great fascination I've had with him, Sebulba, ever since.
What do you think is the coolest Star Wars species?
It's hard for me to ever look past the Wookiees. I think the Wookiees are pretty perfect in terms of just how they're presented. Amazing planet. Obviously, Chewie's the flag bearer of highest importance. And you have Gunji, and just this idea of like how connected they are with nature, their warrior culture. They are not useless in a war. When you're in Star Wars, you kind of need your warriors to come out. So, yeah, I love Wookiees.
Yeah, Wookiees are great. I agree. Kindred spirit. What would your job be in the Star Wars universe? Your vocation, if you lived in Star Wars?
If I could just do anything?
Yeah.
I think based on my previous answer, this may not be a surprise, I would be a pod racer.
Nice.
Yeah. I would also dabble in some riot racing. If
I was just about to talk about riot racing.
Yeah.
If you go in with Quick Draw Quasar, who I know you named yourself on Twitter for quite a while afterwards, and
Quick
my
Quasar,
personal favorite, Haxon the War Gnome Trajanix. That's a wild name.
Yeah, no, riot racing's cool. I'm just a little more classic. I love the pod racers. Just a little more.
You're less likely to die. It's
slightly.
Slightly. We, of course, you know this quote. Everybody, a lot of people in the States love to use this quote, myself included. George Lucas in the documentary for The Phantom Menace. Oh, it's like poetry. They rhyme. Every stanza rhymes to the last. Hope it'll work. What is your favorite "it's like poetry, it rhymes" moment in Star Wars? It can be in anything.
It sits pretty high on the top of the tree. It's not particularly vague, but the fact that Anakin's two decisive moments in his life are watching the same guy electrocute somebody, and one he chooses poorly, and the other he chooses correctly. The fact that these pivotal moments are him watching that guy electrocute someone is stunning to me.
As George put it, I think in the behind the scenes, Anakin says yes and Luke says no to that temptation in the scene. And I know you're talking about slightly later, but it's still those mirror of the scenes with Palpatine shocking people. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite Star Wars planet?
Ooh. Oh, man. I think my default answer is Naboo. I think Naboo is just nice. It's pure comfort planet. And also, you listen to my rankings, my favorite prequel is The Phantom Menace, and so much of it is there. And I love Naboo as a society as a culture, their architecture, the way the planet is, the species. Yeah, I think that's always like if I'm building a Star Wars character and I want them to be from a cool planet, I pick Naboo.
Naboo is nice. Naboo is nice. I agree. If you could take one object or one force power, anything from Star Wars and use it in your real life, what would it be and why?
Object, you said?
Object or force power. Anything nifty from Star Wars, really.
Okay, so the object I would take is an X-Wing. Because A, I love X-Wings, and B, I'd love to be able to get around Earth faster. I love traveling. So I think what better way to travel than shooting off in an X-Wing?
Absolutely. And finally, for our bit that will never end, I'm going to show you a Star Wars character, Nikki, and you just need to tell me how do you pronounce this character's name.
You may know where this is
All
going.
right, let's see what we got. Ooh. I always pronounce that as Zam Wessel.
Yeah, so does almost everyone else. We do this because of disagreement that Devore from A Large View of the Force and I had, because he always thought it was pronounced Wizel. But we have had almost everybody say Wessel. The point is so beaten into the ground. It's been like basically like it almost feels a little mean at this point.
You're just proving the point now.
Yeah, it's just constantly over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
All right, and of course, one last question for you, Nikki, which is before you wrap up this episode. Actually, first, we'll get to that later. I was just gonna say that's gonna be it for this episode of Star Wars in a Galaxy. Next week, I don't know if it'll exactly be next week specifically, but it'll be the next time. I think we might skip a week, but I'm not sure based on Jacob and my schedules. But we will, of course, be doing Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 2 with Lauren Romo of the Galactic Podcast. We're excited to have Lauren on. She's recorded with me on an episode of Theme Between Themes a few years ago on A Galaxy, but I don't think that she and Jacob have ever actually recorded together either. So I'm excited to welcome Lauren onto the show proper. Nikki, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on. It was a great time, great to hang out with you guys and talk about the show. And if anybody wants to hear what else I ramble on about, you can listen to the Imperial Senate podcast. You can find that on Twitter at ImpSenatePod. You can check that out on whatever YouTube stuff we have. The show's been on a break for a while, but the catalog's there and we'll be back shortly. You can also listen to a rewatch Between Worlds, which I do with Alden Diaz on his Octo Radio feed, which is a full Star Wars Rebels watch through. We also do watch the Rebels recons after them, so it is all inclusive, and so we have a good time doing that. You can also listen to the One and Done Film Club, which is something I do with Alden and one of our friends, Reed, where we record movie commentary episodes of franchise movies. So we pick a franchise, we debate amongst ourselves which one we should watch, and we have to vote unanimously, and then we watch it and talk about it. So that's a fun project we have, and you can find that at One Letter N Done Club. And you can also catch me contributing on Casterly Talk, which is the Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings. We talk about Willow as well. YouTube channel by Ken Knapsack and Alden Diaz. So you can check out stuff I got going there.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on. You can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts: Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. We'll be there. Follow us at In a Galaxy Pod on all the social medias: Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, all those places. You can find all my personal links at my Linktree, linktr.e/_OchiFan327, which is where you can find all my personal stuff. And we hope you enjoyed our stream. We're recording this the day before our live stream, our 5th bracket stream, which is going to be on background characters or Glup Shittos. We hope you enjoyed that. I'm excited we're hoping to bring back the bracket streams in a more major way. They've been pretty sporadic at this point, but I've had some new ideas about this and about practice streams, and I'm hoping to bring them back soon and have many of Star Wars creators like Nicky, like all the people we've had on so far, to talk Star Wars in that very pressurized debate format, which just evolves.
Stakes have never been higher.
The stakes have never been higher, and I think yeah, thanks so much for listening. This has a chance, I'm going to just say it in case it is, of being the last episode of Star Wars in the Galaxy in the year 2023. Thanks so much for listening to the show, following us on our journey. Next year, of course, we're going to be continuing with Obi-Wan Kenobi, going on to Jedi Survivor, and other stuff. But in the meantime, thanks so much for listening, and may the Force be with you. Always.
Ooh.